Continuing our reading in No Frills Science Fiction, today is Chapter 6. "This doesn't look like a library planet to me," Dana announced. "It looks like somebody's overexposed safari snapshots." Alex could tell that her quick trip into the high grass to disgorge her stomach had done her no lasting good. The robot was muttering to the world at large, "I can't understand it," and struggling to remain upright in the uncertain breeze. Alex had once again been bottom man, and he was now cautiously feeling sore spots scattered around his battered body. Only the professor was muttering contentedly in the brush, pocketing plant specimens and dissecting small vermin with his fingernail clippers. "What do we do now?" Dana asked of nobody in general. She looked about to cry. "There's not much we can do except keep moving," the ancient bot replied. "I seem to detect electrical activity all around us, though it's very faint. Under us, too." It puzzled. "Perhaps the computer installation is subterranean. In any event, call me Poppy. That's my name, and no one ever uses it." The last sounded rather plaintive, and Dana wondered vaguely how a psionic robot managed to put emotion in its voice. With a start, she realized that Poppy, how strange to be addressing a robot on a first-name basis, was vocalizing. "All the better to understand, my dear." Poppy chuckled. Wearily, the little group got started. After some experimentation, it proved most efficient to send Poppy flying ahead to break the way through the tall grass. The rest followed in a tight wedge. There had been some heated discussion about the operation or objective of direction. After much bickering, which only the robot managed to avoid, Dana and the professor allowed that Alex hadn't done a bad job so far. When he suggested that they keep the mounting sun on their left to avoid walking directly into its afternoon glare, they agreed gratefully. Simple expediency and a quick, aggressive mind ensured that the others would turn to Alex for the casual leadership they deemed necessary. As they marched along, they turned their thoughts to the sequence of events that had led them on this incredible journey. Their reveries were abruptly interrupted at an insignificant chirping in the grass turned up the gain and mounted a wailing, chitinous roar that brought the company to a quick halt. The sound seemed to surround them, but it was only to the rear that the threatening song was accompanied by a peculiar crashing whine that the professor associated with bull elephants. "What?" Alex exclaimed. "What's that?" He was answered when a hairy pair of gray mandibles, fully a yard across, broke into the cleared path behind them. Alex grappled his charges ahead. With the robot in the lead, breaking the thick grass aside, they made considerable speed, but the creature, whatever it was, had no difficulty keeping up. Its mandibles worked incessantly, parting the cane like a machete, and its great jointed legs clambered easily over the fallen grass. "An insect," Alex moaned to himself. Suddenly, a short, streamlined version of the creature darted out of the grass to their right and lunged at the struggling professor. His beard was savagely torn by its mandibles, and he fell beneath its scrabbling, scaled legs. With a savage cry, Dana threw herself on top of Carberry, gathering his frail body in her arms and rolling with him out from under the insect's heavy shell. Alex shouted, "Get the old boy out of here! I'll be along in a few moments." He wheeled on the smaller of the two insects and kicked it viciously in the depression under its mandibles. His foot made a sickening dent in the creature's skull, and the air was suddenly redolent with formalic acid. "Ants," he thought grimly. "They're nothing but giant ants." The smell seemed to infuriate the gathering pack. As Alex slipped back, determined to make his last moments count, three more of the creatures broke into the clearing. Lurching back, feeling his way with his left foot and an arm thrown behind him, Alex aimed another murderous blow at an advancing insect. The giant ant dodged and fended off the kick with a graceful motion of its head section. In that instance, Alex's estimate of its intelligence rose considerably. He suddenly saw that they had been neatly outflanked, outthought, outnumbered. The thought of cold intelligence lurking behind those insect eyes was revolting. Alex fought on, retreating into the brush and gradually leading the ants away from his comrades. Then the ground itself began to seethe beneath his feet, and he realized he'd been lured into a trap. He was near the creature's nest. For the second time, Alex was down, trapped in the loose, roiling soil. He started to curse, but choked on sand and the overpowering stench of formic acid. His eyes were steaming badly, and before he was completely blinded, he caught sight of a familiar figure, flying hell-bent in his direction. Poppy! Alex felt a solid impact jar the ground beside him, and he rolled over to see the bot grind its bulk into one of the ant's carapaced faces. The blow split its skull, and sticky, sickening fluid spurted forth. The bot flung itself into the fury like a dervish, and the air was soon filled with ant fragments. Crazed insects had been turned cannibal by the carnage and were devouring their fellows. Alex recovered his balance. "Poppy!" he shouted. We've got to get out of here!" The bot was busily crushing a particularly large and aggressive specimen into the soil. The creature's body was burst in a dozen places, and it was dying badly, waving its limbs drunkenly in a futile attempt to defend itself. "Come on!" Alex cried. "We're going!" He grabbed at the bot to emphasize his point and began hobbling off, dodging stray, struggling insects until he reached the original clearing. There he was joined by Poppy. With a hint of pride in its mechanical voice, the plucky bot added, "Are you all right?" Without waiting for a reply, it continued, "If so, I've got something to show you." Together, the two warriors struggled back to their companions. The bot was bouncing ahead and exclaiming aloud, "I was right all along." Alex was too tired to ask what it meant. As they broke from the grass, Alex cried out in surprise. Dana and the professor were backed up against a steel gray wall that towered overhead. The excited robot repeated to itself, "I was right all along." With a wide grin on her face, Dana announced, "Welcome to the library planet." And that's the end of chapter 6.